Okay, we're going to go through these first couple using long division. The first thing that you want to do is you want to focus on this leading term and this leading term. So in our case, we have 2x and 10x to the power of 4. We're thinking to ourselves, what do we need to multiply by the 2x that will get us that 10x to the 4th? Well, we need a 5x to the power of 3. If we check, 5 times 2 will get us 10, and the x to the power of 3 times another x will give us x to the power of 4. We're going to continue to multiply by the second term. 5 times a negative 2 this time will give us a negative 10, and we will have those 3 x's with it. After multiplying, you always want to subtract, so that means we are going to change a sign on every term. The 10x to the power of 4 minus 10x to the power of 4 will give us a 0. Here we have negative 4 plus 10. That will give us a positive 6, x to the power of 3. You can now bring down the next term. If you want, you can bring down all terms. And then we're going to repeat what we just did. So now we're thinking to ourselves, we have a 2x, and we want a 6x to the third. Again, I'm only looking at the first terms, the leading terms each time. Well, we know that you can multiply by 3 to get from a 2 to a 6. And we had 1x, so we need 2 more, so we'll make that x squared. We're now going to multiply, so we're going with 3x squared times 2x. That will give us 6x to the power of 3. And we're going to multiply 3x squared times negative 2, which will give us negative 6x squared. After multiplying, we always want to change our signs because we are subtracting. I'm going to make that positive a negative and this negative into a positive. Now we can see that the 6x cubes will cancel, and we have a 14x squared plus 6x squared, which will give us 20x squared. And we can bring down that negative 14x. Now we're looking for 2x to become a 20x squared, so we're thinking 2x times what will give us 20x squared? Well, 2 times 10 will give us 20, and we need 1 more x to get a power of 2. We're now going to multiply 10x times 2x. That will give us 20x squared, and our 10x times negative 2 will give us negative 20x. We've just multiplied, so now we're going to subtract. Again, that means we're changing the sign of all of the terms. 20x squared and 20x squared cancel because they're opposites. Negative 14x and 20x will give us 6x. And there's nothing else to bring down, so we're going to check and see if we can do this again. We have a 2x here, and we need to see if we can get it to become a 6x. Well, we can, because we can multiply by a 3. We're going to multiply 3 times 2x. That will give us 6x, and then 3 times negative 2 will give us negative 6. Before we start to cancel, let's not forget to change the sign, making that a negative 6x and a positive 6. And I'm running out of room over here. The 6x and negative 6x will cancel, and we will be left with a positive 6 as our remainder. So we can write that remainder here over our divisor. So I'm just copying that divisor from out here. Okay, now we're going to be dividing by x plus 1. We're looking at x and 2x cubed, and we're thinking to ourselves, what do you need to multiply by x to get us that 2x cubed? That is a 2x to the power of 2. Now we're going to multiply 2x squared times x and 2x squared times 1. We're then going to change the sign, making this a negative and that one a negative. 2x cubed minus 2x cubed, they cancel. Negative 1x squared minus 2x squared will give us a negative 3x squared. And we will bring down the rest of the polynomial. Okay, we're going to repeat those steps. You are thinking, what do you need to multiply x by to get negative 3x squared? That would be negative 3x. Now we can multiply negative 3x times x will give us negative 3x squared, and negative 3x times 1 will give us negative 3x. After we multiply, we're always going to change the sign. So I'm going to change both of these to positives. Negative 3x squared plus 3x squared cancels. We have a negative 6x plus 3x, which will give us negative 3x, and we'll bring down that negative 1 that we still have. Okay, now we're looking at negative 3x and x. We need to multiply something by x to give us negative 3x. That's going to be a negative 3. If we multiply, we get a negative 3x and a negative 3. We're going to make sure to change the sign one last time, making these both positive, and a negative 1 plus 3 will give us a positive 2 as our remainder. Again, we can write it as a fraction, putting our remainder over our divisor. For this one, we have an x and a 6x to the power of 5. We are thinking about what we need to multiply by x to get 6x to the power of 5. We need 6x to the power of 4. When you multiply 6x to the power of 4 times x, we do get 6x to the power of 5. And 6x to the power of 4 times 4 will be 24x to the 4th. We're going to make sure that we are subtracting, so we're going to change the sign of both of these, making them both negative. 6x to the power of 5 minus 6x to the power of 5 turns into 0, so they cancel. That should happen every time. That's the indicator that you have chosen that first term of the quotient correctly. 21x to the power of 4 minus 24x to the power of 4 is a negative 3x to the power of 4. And we're going to bring down that next term, and then we're going to repeat those steps. Now we're looking at negative 3x to the power of 4 and deciding what we need to multiply x by to get that. Well, we need a negative 3x to the power of 3. We're going to multiply. Negative 3x cubed times x is negative 3x to the 4th. We're going to multiply negative 3x cubed times 4, which will give us negative 12x to the 3rd. We're going to change the sign, making these both a positive. The x to the power of 4's cancel. Negative 14 plus 12 will give us negative 2x to the power of 3. And I will bring down that next term. Okay, now we're looking at negative 2x to the power of 3 and deciding what needs to multiply by our x to get that. We are going to multiply by a negative 2 and an x squared. Negative 2x squared times x will give us negative 2x cubed. Negative 2x squared times 4 will give us negative 8x squared. We can now change the signs, making them both a positive. We have canceling, and actually, well, what happens here is we have a negative 8x squared and a positive, so those also cancel. So we will bring down the x, and I'm going to bring down the negative 6 just to make sure in case we have some like terms with it also. And so it looks like we have one more round to go. If we look at our x, we need an x. Well, they're already the same, so all we need to do is multiply by a 1. Don't forget that one. Sometimes students will just leave it off. 1 times our x will give us x, and 1 times 4 will give us 4. We are going to change a sign, making it a negative x and a negative 4. X minus x cancels. Negative 6 minus 4 will give us a remainder of negative 10. I know I can't keep going any further because the exponent on the x is a 1, and the exponent here on this remainder is technically a 0. And so if the remainder has a smaller degree than the divisor, then you know you can stop. So we have our negative 10 over our divisor of x plus 4. Okay, now we're going to do some examples with synthetic division. So for synthetic division, you just want to make sure that this divisor has an x with a power of 1. So as long as it does, you're good to go. If there's a power of 2 or a power of 3, you won't be able to use synthetic division. The other thing we want to do before we set it up is you want to make sure that the x values, the variables, that they are in descending order. So the highest power being a 4, followed by a 3, a 2. There's an invisible 1 here. And we know that a constant, you could say, has x to the power of 0. So we just want to make sure that those powers are all in descending order and that there's no numbers missing. So we have 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Everything is good to go for synthetic. We're going to put our root first. Our root comes from our divisor here. If we set this x plus 2 equal to 0, like we did with our factoring and using our zero product property, we can solve by subtracting to cancel the positive 2, and we'll be left with a root of negative 2. So we're going to use that negative 2, and we're going to put it here. The next thing we're going to do is take the coefficients, and we're going to write them in order along the top, making sure if you see a negative or a subtraction to bring it down as a negative. Now we're ready to go through the motions of synthetic division. We're going to start by bringing down this first coefficient. We're then going to take the root, multiply by the coefficient, and put it underneath the next number. Here we have negative 2 times 3. That will give us a negative 6. After that, we're going to add straight down. 7 plus negative 6 is a 1. And then we're just going to repeat those steps. We're going to take our negative 2. We're now multiplying by the 1. That should give us negative 2. We're going to add straight down. 3 plus negative 2 is a 1. We're going to repeat that again. We have our negative 2 times a 1 again. That'll still give us negative 2. We're going to add negative 1 plus negative 2 will give us negative 3. And one more time with multiplication, we have our root of negative 2 again. Now we're multiplying by a negative 3 to give us a positive 6. And this time when we add straight down, negative 4 plus 6 will give us 2. We are ready to write our answer. This number that we have at the end in the box, or the last number, this will always be your remainder. So that's going to be the numerator of our fraction. And we're going to go back here, and that divisor was x plus 2. We're going to put that at the bottom. Now working our way to the left, we have our constant. So we're going to have our negative 3 as our constant. And then as we continue, we're going to add an x every time. So the 1 will get an x. We'll add another x. So this will become an x squared. And we will have a 3x. So there's our answer. We're going to take a look at this one. We have our divisor, which is x minus 1. We are allowed to use synthetic because of the power of 1 here. If we take a look at our exponents, we have a 3, a 2, a 1, and a 0, so everything is in descending order. We're going to set up our synthetic division. We will take the divisor, set it equal to 0. We can cancel the -1 by adding 1, and we will get a root of 1. Now we can take our coefficients. We're starting with the 4, the leading coefficient. Now we have a -2. We're just listing them across the top. There's a 1 and a -3. And we'll start by bringing down the 4. The 4 is going to be multiplied by the 1, which is our root. We get an answer of 4. We are going to add straight down. -2 plus 4 is a +2. We're going to multiply again, remembering that we always multiply by the root. So 1 times 2 is 2. We are adding straight down. 1 plus 2 will give us 3. We'll go back to this root again. 1 times 3 is 3. And -3 plus 3 will give us 0. So this time we ended up with a remainder of 0, which means that everything divided evenly, and so x minus 1 would be considered a factor of 4x cubed minus 2x squared plus x minus 3. I'm not going to write the fraction because we don't need it. We're going to start with a 3. Again, starting on the right, you have a constant. We're going to add an x, and then an x squared. So our answer, our quotient, is 4x squared plus 2x plus 3. Remember that that means that 4x cubed minus 2x squared plus x minus 3 is equal to the x minus 1 that we took out times our quotient of 4x squared plus 2x plus 3. Okay, we're going to do this next one. If we take a look at the divisor, you can see that we do have a linear divisor with a power of 1 on the x, so we're okay to go. We're going to find the root. Again, you're setting it equal to 0. We can cancel the 1 by subtracting, and our root is -1. Next, we're going to take a look at the powers. So on our dividend, we have a power of 4, power of 2, power of 1, and power of 0. So if we notice, they do go in descending order from the largest to the smallest, but we do have an issue right here. We go 4 and then 2. There's no 3. So we are missing an x to the power of 3. So when we go to set our coefficients in synthetic division, we need to make sure that we have a 0 there to act as a placeholder. Other than that, everything is going to be the same. We're going to bring down our 16. We're going to multiply our root by 16 and get -16. We're going to add those together. 0 plus -16 is -16. We can multiply that by our root again. Our root was -1, so now we have a +16. We can add 2 plus 16 is 18. We're multiplying by -1 again, so that's going to change it to -18. We can add a -21 and a -18 and get -39. And multiplying by our root again, we have a +39 here, and added to 7 gives us a 46. So for our answer, our remainder is 46. We're going to bring that down as our numerator of our fraction. Moving to the left, we have -39, our constant. We're going to add an x to our 18 and make it 18x. We will add another power of x, so x squared with -16. And then our leading coefficient will have 16 with a power of 3.